Hello everybody, Green Man Bookseller here, and I'm doing another book review. It's been a little while since I've done a book review video, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing this book, Chronicles from the Future, the amazing story of Paul Amadeus Dienach, and it's edited by Achilles Syrigos. I don't know how well I've pronounced those names, so apologies if I've mispronounced them. This is a book that was recommended to me by Amazon as a result of the fact that I'd bought the book called The Vertical Plane. Just to recap on The Vertical Plane, that was a book about a gentleman who in the 1980s had a computer that started to receive messages sent to him by a gentleman who lived in the 16th century. So kind of a time travel type theme to that story. And this book, Chronicles from the Future, it's got a kind of a time travel theme to it as well. Though slightly different flavour of time travel to The Vertical Plane. The Paul Dienach is his story. He's a gentleman who in the 1920s fell into a kind of a narcoleptic coma for about a year, during which time, according to his diary, and this book's based on his diary, the best way to describe it is his soul left his body and travelled 2,000 years into the future to the early 40th century. I think 3904, 3905. Oh no, 3906 AD. So his soul went to the year 3906 and entered into the body of another man, a gentleman who lived in that time period. And for that 1 year period in which Paul was in a kind of a narcoleptic coma, his soul inhabited the body of this gentleman who lived in the early 40th century. And when Paul came out of his coma, what he did was he wrote down as much as he could remember of the future, and that's basically what this book is. So this Achilles Syrigos, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right, he's put together this book. I mean this was printed only last year, 2024, and so this is the English version of the Paul Dienach's diaries, and it's basically Paul recounting the year that he lived in the future, and he recounts what society's like in the early 40th century, and he also recounts as much as he can remember of the 2,000 years worth of future history, for want of a better way of putting it. The 2,000 years between now and 3906. So that's basically the premise of this book. Now, I really enjoyed reading The Vertical Plane. This is the story of the gentleman with the computer on which he was receiving messages from the past. Thoroughly loved reading that story. So when this got recommended to me as a result of buying that book, I thought I'll give this a punt. My mother-in-law kindly bought it for me as a birthday present last year. I didn't get on with this as well as I did The Vertical Plane. I found it to be very dry. Now, this Paul, he did a very good job of recounting what he remembers of the future, like the early 40th century. But there wasn't any soul to this book. It's the best way of describing it is it felt like a bog standard plain history book, a textbook, a school book. It's just recounting events, experiences, but there's no soul or emotion behind it, and it does come across a little bit dry. The one thing I found with the vertical plane was when I was reading that, the way that book was written, you're kind of thinking, well, is somebody setting up the guy with the computer? Is somebody sneaking in and sending fake messages to him on the computer? Is one of his academic colleagues having him on? Or could it actually be true? You know, the way that book was written is written in such a way you could almost easily believe there's an element of truth to what's going on there. The messages really are appearing on the computer from the past. One thing I said in my book review video on that particular book was, there's a part of me that believes that might actually have happened. I personally can't discount that as being false and just some kind of a hoax or a made up. But with this book, so as I was reading it, the way it was written, I just couldn't help but think that this is just a made up story. Somebody's just put it together for a bit of fun. Well, not a bit of fun, but there's no part of me that's thinking this could possibly have actually happened, because it comes across as so dry, because it comes across as just like a textbook, a boring old textbook, because there's no soul or emotion to it. It very easily comes across as though this Paul Dienach has just sat down and thought, "Ooh, what if this happens? What would the next 2,000 years look like if this happened?" You know, and he's and for whatever reason, he's just put together a fictitious timeline of future history. He's just created a fictitious line of events for the next 2,000 years, and then used that as a way of creating a fictitious society in the early 40th century, and has decided to write a book about it, and his decision and his idea of how to present it would be as pretending he's gone to the future and presenting it that way. In short, I believe this is just a complete fiction story put together by this Paul. I just can't find myself at all believing that his soul actually did travel to 2,000 years into the future. There's no part of me that's thinking there's any element of truth to it. I mean, it's one of those books, I suppose, if I hadn't have already read The Vertical Plane, and if I hadn't enjoyed that book so much, I might have possibly enjoyed this book a lot more than I did. But because in my mind I kept comparing it to The Vertical Plane, a book that I enjoyed very much, and because this is such a different vibe to it than that book, I think that's probably part of the reason why I didn't get on with this book all that well. I mean, it's got merits to it. It's an interesting enough read. You know, it wasn't all that bad. You know, I did get elements of enjoyment out of reading it, but yeah, I wouldn't rave about it. I wouldn't rave about it. So, what I will say is, if you like reading books that have got a sort of time travel theme to them, if you like reading books in which the authors are claiming to have experienced either the past or the future, this isn't an altogether bad book to have on your bookshelf. This is possibly one of the more worthwhile ones worth having. But I mean, I personally would say if you've got to choose between this one and the vertical plane, better off going for the vertical plane. But yeah. So anyway, guys, that's my review of Chronicles from the Future. Hope you've enjoyed watching. And if you've read this book, I'd be interested to know what you thought of it and what your views about it are. So yeah, feel free to drop me a comment. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. And in the meantime, stay safe. Happy reading.